Tractate Pesachim, Mem Daled. So we ended off yesterday with the opinion of Zeiri, which seems to be a little bit different, because he's adding, it's actually a fascinating concept of Isur and Heter coming together. In this case, Heter and Isur, if they combine, if they join together. So the Gemara says, no, they're not joining together, the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, except the case of Nazir. So Nazir, in order for him to violate his Nazirite status, he has to drink. He can, even if he drinks regular juice mixed with even grape juice, but the idea is that it's something that is heter for him, that is mixed with something that is prohibited for him. So the example that we saw brought by Rashi is he dipped bread in wine. So dipping bread in wine, it's heter and isur, because bread is not a problem for him. Wine is an issue. Dip the two, now they can combine to make a kazait. And once he's consuming a volume out of his volume, he is liable. Comes the Iri and he says, this applies also to se'oil. What does that mean? In the prohibition, do not burn on the altar leaven is also connected with se'oil. Case which is permitted, in a case in which the permitted combines with the forbidden. Now, what was the example of se'oil? So we said in 33 he gave the example, that is, if one burnt a half a kazais of leaven together with half a kazais of matzah on the altar. According to Zeiri, he committed violation by doing so. Half a kazais leaven, half a kazais matzah. So now this is the discussion of today. Keman, in accordance with whom did Zeiri make his assertion? Rabbi Lezer. And he said, what did Rabbi Lezer do? Rabbi Lezer dorish kol I. Rabbi Lezer dorish kol. Rabbi Lezer expounds on every time it says in the word in the Torah kol, he learned something from it. What did he learn from kol? So it says in 34, the Gemara above identifies Rabbi Lezer as the Tana of the Baita, that derives from the word koil, any stated in Leviticus 2:11, that one is liable for burning leaven on the altar, even if only a portion of it is chametz. Okay, a mixture of chametz.
This is even a portion. It's speaking of at least a kazayas, though.
No. Even a drop.
Here he says it. It's a portion of it. Zeiri interprets a portion of it to mean a portion of the kazais minimum needed for liability. That is, one burnt a kazais of meal on the altar, kazais of meal on the altar, but only a portion of that kazait was chametz.
Oh, so the idea is that it became a kazayas based on the prohibited and the permitted part together.
Exactly.
Right, that's what we learned yesterday.
And this comes to support Zeir's position that the concept of heter and isur coming together is also in se'oil, in leaven. So now in Mem Daled it says ve'iyam chametz Pesach nami. Then Zeiri should have stated that the combination principle applies with respect to eating chametz on Pesach as well. Why did he add only the case of burning leaven on the altar? Indeed, it is so. Zeiri could have mentioned the case of mixed chametz as another application of the combination principle, but to exclude from the view of Abaye. Why? What did Abaye says? The Omar Yesh Haktor Lefoches Mikazais, who says that there is application of the term burning on the altar to things less than a kazais. And one is liable for burning even less than a kazais of leaven on the altar. According to Abaye, the combination principle is irrelevant to this case, because the whole idea of the principle of combination is to say that heter comes together with isu. But if less than a kazais is also a prohibition, then what do we need the combination? Even without the combination,
Everything is isu.
is asu, exactly.
Right.
Kamashman Daktor Lav Lefochas Mikazais. To preclude this view, Zeir states that the combination principle does indeed apply to the case of chametz on the altar, and thereby informs us that the term burning on the altar does not apply to things less than a kazais. So at least this is the opinion of Zeir. Yosef Rav Dimi v'komar lo lehoshmaita. Comes Rav Dimi and he relating this teaching to Rabbi Yochanan. Remember, Rabbi Yochanan is the one who said that there's nothing else beside the Nazir. There's no such a thing as Heter and Isur combining together except the case of Nazir. Comes, he tells them, Lo Shmaita, Amor LaAbaye, LeRav Dimi v'chol Isurim Shebatero En Heter Mitzarf L'Isur. He's challenging Rabbi Yochanan view. But now, and he gives an example. You said, and is it so that in the case of all other prohibited substances mentioned in the Torah, a permitted substance does not combine with a forbidden one to compose the minimum punishable measure? And learned otherwise in the following Mishnah. Amik Pashal Tuma, with regard to a spiced porridge, of the porridge itself, if the porridge itself is made from teruma. Remember we discussed this before. The porridge is a kind of
Cooked cereal,
cooked cereal, breakfast type of
like oatmeal, cream of wheat.
It's creamy. It's really creamy. Like
Yes, cooks together in water. It's very smooth.
Trying to think how they called it in Israel. 'Cause I remember they used to serve it. It's like a pot. It almost looked like a soup.
Right.
Taisa.
Taisa?
Yeah. Porridge. Okay. So over here it's called mikvah. This one I guess is a spiced porridge. The porridge itself is made from turma, v'hashum v'hashemen shel chulin, and the garlic and oil that season it. That's why it's spiced, because they used garlic and oil. Are from ordinary produce, not turma. So garlic and oil are okay. The porridge itself is teruma. Now, so far it seems fine, right? V'noga tevul yom b'miksosim. And a tevul yom is someone that has to wait for the nighttime to be tahor, touched part of the porridge. Posal is kul. He is disqualified not only the truma, but also the garlic and the oil.
If he normally touches
What does it
something-
show? 1 second, what does it show? If
There's
he
something that... Oh,
shows that the garlic and the oil, that they were not truma, became truma. So they became one blend. They combined together. That's what comes to mind. Because otherwise, if they don't combine, he should only disqualify the truma, not the non-truma part of this mixture, of this porridge.
Because if Tel Yom touches non-Truma, then he doesn't affect it.
Right,
Normally, just
right.
plain.
He only affects truma. So, v'nogat tevul yoim b'miktzoson, and the tevul yoim then touched part of them, pos al school, and disqualified all of them, the entire porridge. Amik poshel chulin. However, in the reverse situation, the porridge itself is made from ordinary produce. But the garlic and the oil is truma, v'ashum v'ashemesh are truma, v'noga tevul yom mikzoson. And the tevul yom touched part of them. Loi posal ela mokim agoy bilvad. He has disqualified only the place of his touch. Vavinva. And in the traditional discussion regarding this Mishnah, we raised the following difficulty. The following difficulty concerning it. Mokoy magoy amay psul. Why is the place of his touch disqualified? Habotlalu tovlin beroy. The seasonings, the tuuma, garlic, and oil, and the porridge are nullified in the majority of the non-tuuma porridge. So the entire porridge should be okay. Should be treated as a non-tuuma entity, and even the place touched by the tevul yom should remain fit for consumption. Do you understand? They're saying it should be nullified. The little bit of teruma, the spices that are teruma, should be nullified to the chulin porridge.
Except for what we know about oil, oil travels everywhere. So if you touch a piece of the oil,
You're touching everywhere.
you're touching everywhere.
No, but it's not the.
I understand it's the minority.
No, it's the minority. It's not about it being in all places. It's whether the porridge is tuma or non-tuma. If I say the porridge is tuma, then he touched it, it disqualified the whole thing. But if I say the porridge is non-tuma, and even though it has spices of tuma, then it should not be effective at all.
So you'd have to have a quantitative disqualification. In other words, have
Right.
to be a very tiny amount of the oil
Of spices
and spices,
Right.
so much larger.
to the porridge.
He's not saying that here.
Well, he's just showing us two opposite cases. The one is the porridge is tuma and the spices are chulin, and one that the porridge is chulin and the spices is tuma. So let's see why is it not? Why when he touched, that part becomes disqualified? Because a non-Kohen is liable to lashes for eating them, this truma mixture in the amount of an olive's volume. So for a non-Kohen to eat truma is a violation. And how much does a non-Kohen can eat to incur the violation is to kazais. Echidami. So the Gemara says kazais, an olive's volume.
Right.
So echidami, how is it that a non-Kohen is subject to lashes for eating a kazais of truma spiced porridge, even though he has not consumed a kazais of the truma itself? Lav mishum the heter mitzvah fleisur. That's really the punchline. He's telling him, isn't it not because heter and isur can combine together? Not like you, Rabbi Yochanan, who said that it's only in the case of nazir. Here's an example from teruma. Okay, so teruma, garlic and oil. To complete the minimum punishable measure, the statement of Rabbi Yochanan then contradicts his own assertion above that the combination principle applies only to the Nazirus prohibition. So Avdimi answers, no, in this second statement, the one cited by Rabba Bar Chana, Rabbi Yochanan does not mean that a non-kazais is liable, that a non-Kohen is liable for eating an olive's volume of the porridge. So my kazais, what does he mean when he says that a non-Kohen receives lashes for eating an olive's volume? The Ika kazais bichdei achilas pas. He means that there's an olive's volume of teruma ingredient that would be eaten in the time it takes to eat a pras of the porridge. And it means that a non-Kohen is liable for eating a pras of the porridge because he has thereby eaten a kazais of actual teruma during a single act of eating. The statement has nothing to do at all with the combination principle. So he comes in and says, no, it's different. When we say kazais over here, deika kazais v'chdei achilas pras. Like you said, in the spices, there's enough. There's an olive's volume of spices. And he ate it in the time it takes to eat a pras of the porridge. Because what happens if somebody eats kazais slowly? So you ate the olive's volume, but you ate it very slowly.
Yes, sir.
So is it mitztaref or not? Is it combining or not? So he says that he ate it, in this case they're saying that he ate it kedei achilas pras, which we know that achilas pras has two, some say that it's 4 minutes and some say it's 7 minutes.
Let's we have the whole thing on Pesach.
On Pesach,
with the
yeah.
matzah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have some more over here.
One day at a time,
Yeah.
because I don't want to do it all within 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And taking the lenient.
Yeah. Oh man.
Amen.
And is the principle that an olive's volume of forbidden food consumed in the time it takes to eat a pras is considered to have been eaten at one time a biblical law that it should make one liable to lashes? Is it a biblical law? The Gemara says, he says, Abai said to him, yes, it is indeed biblical law. If that's the case, that it is a biblical law, why did the rabbis differ with Rabbi Eliezer regarding Babylonian kutach? Elamai, what alternative explanation do you offer for Rabbi Bar Chana's ruling that a non-Kohen is liable for lashes for eating a kazais of Tuma? Mishum deheter mitztaref. So in this case, he is liable for eating a kazais of the porridge because the permitted combines with the forbidden to compose the punishable measure. The permitted combines with the forbidden. Sof seif. Amai pligi rabban alei de Rabbi Eliezer b'chutach habavli. In the final analysis, your explanation too would be best, or would be set by the difficulty. Why do the rabbis differ with Rabbi Eliezer concerning Babylonian kutach? They too should agree that the permissible ingredients in the kutach combine with the bread content to compose the punishable measure. Rather, leave it aside. Leave aside the case of Babylonian kutach. The leis bekazais v'chdei achilas pras, for it does not contain an olive's volume of chametz. For it does not contain an olive's volume of chametz that is eaten within the time it takes to eat a pas, as Rav Dimi proceeds to explain, if he consumes the kutach as is, he gulps, in that he gulps and eats it straight rather than uses it as a dip. Instead of dipping, he just drinks it or swallows it. Botlo daitetz kolodo. He is not behaving, bless you,
Blessing.
he is not behaving in a normal fashion. His unusual attitude is nullified from being considered normal when viewed in relation to the attitude of all other people. And if he dips his other food into it, and that's the usual way, it does not contain an olive's volume of chametz that is eaten within the time it takes to eat a pas of other food.
So Esav ate the porridge.
You could say it. Yeah. He gulped it. So
Gulp is to do this.
A lot at once.
Gulp.
Gulp.
New word.
So what is it trying to tell us? That usually people don't eat it that way. That's what I mean. He gulps and eats straight rather than uses the dip. That's not the regular way. His unusual attitude is nullified in relation to the attitude of all other people. And if he eats it in a normal way, there's not a chilas pas there. There's going to take more time than 4 minutes. So Abai continues to question of Dimi's assertion that eating a kazais of forbidden food within a pas span is cause for liability according to biblical law.
Well, according to this, if you eat very slow, you're not be liable.
Right. So as long as you did not eat a kazais during that 4 minutes. So if you ate something not kosher in 10 minutes, took you 10 minutes to eat it, maybe you were licking it, and you seemingly you're not liable. Everything has a price, but not the seemingly it's not the malchus. Abaya continues to question of Dimi's assertion that eating a kazais of forbidden food within a pas span, achilas pas, is cause for liability according to biblical law. ACV, he challenged of Dimi from the following by steak dealers. If there were 2 pots, one pot containing ordinary food, chulin, and one pot is containing teruma. And in front of them were 2 mortars in which spices were crushed. Okay, so you have each pot, and next to it there's a smaller pot, a mortar, where they make the spices. They grind the spice, and then they would put the spices in the pot. So each pot has a dedicated mortar. And so one mortar was truma, and one mortar was chulin. And the contents of these mortars fell into those pots. The contents of one mortar into one pot, and the contents of one into another pot. So, but it is not known which spices fell into which pot. Mutav, they are permitted. Why they are permitted? Shani Eimer, I say, Turuma l'teicha, turuma nafla. The turuma spices fell into the pot of turuma. V'chulin t'chulin naflu. And the ordinary spices fell into the pot of ordinary food. Abaye concludes his argument. V'yomat kazais b'chdei achilas pas deoraisa. Now, if you say that a kazais eaten within the time needed to eat a pras combines from a biblical standpoint, then why do we have the right to say here that the pot of ordinary food remains permitted to a non-Kohen, for I say that the teruma spices fell into the pot of teruma, etc. If it's biblical, you can't be so lenient about it. Does this not prove, or does this not prove that even in the event that the teruma spices did fall into the ordinary food, a non-Kohen would not be biblically liable for eating that food? It says, leave aside the case of teruma of spices, which is teruma only rabbinically. It says in
there's a biblical and a rabbinic teruma?
So that's what I was saying. In 31, it says the Torah in the Deuteronomy 18:4 states that only that teruma must be separated from your grain, your wine, and your olive oil. The teruma applies to other produce. Is but rabbinic enactment. Rambam considers the teruma requirement for all foods to be biblical. He agrees, however, that various other forms of produce are not biblically subject to teruma. Accordingly, Rav Dimi would be explaining that the baita refers to those spices that are not biblically subject to teruma. Since the baita's case involves a doubt regarding rabbinic law, we may assume the lenient possibility, right, that the teruma spices fell into the pot of teruma, and the chulin fell into the pot of chulin. She cites here the version of the sugya found in the parable in a parallel passage in Nazir. Rav Dimi prefaces his present reply to Abaye with the observation as above. And Abaye's position is no less encumbered by the difficulty that he himself raises than is the position he is challenged. Okay,
What?
let's see. This is a
Everything made sense until the last 5 words.
right. No, it says they're just bringing Rashi's from a different sugya in Nazir and similar discussion on this. But what is related to us is what we discussed before. So it's a rabbinic enactment. So what is the obligation to teruma? Your grain, your wine, and your olive oil, which is the teruma applies to other produce is but a rabbinic enactment. So ATV, in this case, it was just spices, right? So it's a rabbinic enactment that these spices are.
So if it was from olive oil, for example, they wouldn't hold this way?
You're saying
Olive oil is derisa.
saying olive oil is
It's dry, so therefore they would say it couldn't be eaten.
Yeah, but now more of the crushed spices is not olive.
It's
Right.
like the spices
Oh,
is
you know,
separate because it's
you know,
not
chocolate
part of
and
that
roll.
process.
So, ACV, shtei kupos, 2 boxes. 4 was 2 pots. Now it's 2 boxes. Achash shechur, achash turma, containing ordinary grain and 1 containing turma. Lifneim shtei sein, and in front of them 2 seah containers of grain. One containing grain chulin and one grain of truma. And now if these containers fell into those, you're not sure what is what anymore. The contents of one container into one box, and the contents of one into the other box. It's not known which fell into which. Mutorin, they are permitted. Why? Why they are permitted? Shani oimer, for I say that chulin letoy chulin naflu. The grain in the ordinary container fell into the box of ordinary grain, and everything is fine. But it's an assumption. Shani oimer is an assumption. Teruma letoy teruma naflu, and this is also an assumption that the teruma, the grain in the teruma container, fell into the box of teruma. So Abai concludes his argument, and he says, if you say that a kazais eaten within the time needed to eat a pras, combines from a biblical standpoint. If it's biblical, you can't say, I'm saying the chulin fell into chulin and the truma fell into truma. Why do I have the right to say here that the box of ordinary grain remains permitted to a non-Kohen? For I say that the container of truma fell into the box of truma. How can you say that? We're dealing with a biblical standpoint. It says, what did we just say? If you say that a kazai is eaten within the time needed to eat a pras, combines from a biblical standpoint, then the guy is possibly eating truma. How can you say Shani? Amar le anach truma bezman hazeh d'rabbanan. He said, leave it alone, leave it aside, leave aside truma nowadays. Why? Because nowadays it's rabbinic. Truma is rabbinically, which applies only rabbinically. Hence, we may assume the lenient possibility. Above, it was reported in 43b, in the name of Yechanan, that the combination principle applies to the substances forbidden to a Nazir, because the Torah says in their regard, mishras, infused. The Gemara now challenged that assertion. V'hai mishras leho childos. But the word mishras, infused, in fact, come to teach this rule that the combination principle applies to the substances forbidden to a Nazir. This word infused is needed for something else. Mishras, the Torah expression infuse, liten tam keikar, to make flavor equivalent to substance. Flavor equivalent to substance, which means she'im shora novim b'mayim, if the nozzle soaked grapes in water, trying to be a wise guy, soaking grapes in water, v'yesh b'm tam yain, now this water somehow have a flavor of wine, chayo, he's liable to lashes for drinking the grape flavored water. Nazir. From here you can extrapolate to all other prohibitions of the Torah through the following line of reasoning. Nazir, whose prohibition is not a permanent prohibition, it's only for during the time being that he is Nazir. Most Nazirim are not Nazir for life, they're Nazir for the time being, for a month, for a year. And whose prohibition is not a prohibition against benefit from grape products, but only against eating them. V'yesh heter l'isuro, and whose prohibition can be released even before the term expires.
This is the guy with the standard Nazir.
How can he has how can he change? By having the vow cancelled by a sage or panel. You can go, the Atoras Nedorim. You can change it.
Yeah, okay.
So we have two things about Nazir. First of all, it's not Isur Oilom. It's not a permanent prohibition. And number two, Ein Isur Ano. Actually three things. And number two, Ein Isur Ano, which means his prohibition is not a prohibition against benefit. He's allowed to be selling wine, selling grapes. He only has a problem with eating them. And not only that, there's even a heter l'suroi, he can get out of it.
But the second example of he could benefit from it, he could sell them. Didn't we say yesterday that if a Nazir was walking with another group and they were going to walk through?
Yeah, but not him.
He has to
Not
walk
him
around.
directly selling it, meaning he can have an agent that he benefit from grapes. He can own a vineyard, he's not allowed to go through it. So, we see all these three things about Nazir. Also, Beitam Kikar, nevertheless, despite all these things that we just mentioned, the three things, the Torah made flavor equivalent to substance in its regard, meaning that there's no substance. Remember, what was the case? He soaked olives in water. There's no substance. Grapes. And now there's no substance. There's flavor, and he's liable. Despite all the things that we said that he doesn't have Isur Oilom, no Isur Ano, and he has a heter, he has a way to get out.
Rabbi, I have a question about Nazir. The guy wants to get close to Hashem, and he drank this grape flavor. He get lashes. Imagine after the lashes, the guy I won't be Nazir anymore in my life, because just for tasting something, I get lashes.
Timing. He should, if he didn't want to do it anymore, he should have first got himself released from the vow.
Or else wait a
He
month.
made a vow.
Usually it's a month. The standard Nazir term is like a month. I mean, not everybody's like Shimshon, that's forever. So if it's a month, you wait out a month, or you get the rabbi.
And again, this is not something that someone is doing unintentionally. He's doing it intentional.
Yeah, dafka.
I guess the part of that is the seriousness of a vow. You make a vow.
Of course.
Like this.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
That's why you
So
say
that's-
we never all the time.
That's the problem.
Yeah. I think.
The biggest problem is knowing that it's not okay and doing it.
The awareness.
That's why they say ignorant is a bliss, because if you don't know, it's not as bad as knowing and still doing it.
The word happened that Nazirim get lashes? It happened?
I don't know. I'm sure it's not so simple to get it, because you have to have witnesses, you have to have warning, you have to have writer, they need to know what to say. And the Nazir itself need to know what to say.
And they
He
have to
tells
be
them, I know it,
in
and I'm
different-
still doing
You
it.
have to, it's a whole thing about the witnesses. It's like very not.
It's very hard to actually
Get a conviction.
get a conviction and nevertheless, despite these lenient features, the Torah made flavor equivalent to substance in its regard. Kilaim, then in the case of kilaim of a vineyard, remember that these are like veggies growing into a vineyard. Shisuroi isu oilom. V'isur isu ano v'enetel isur. So when it comes to kilaim of the vineyard, we have exactly the three opposite features. That the prohibition is forever, permanent, and you're not allowed to benefit, and there's no way to get out of it. Those prohibition cannot be released. Eino din sheyasa tam kika. Is it not dictated by logic of Kal V'chomer that the Torah would make flavor equivalent to substance in its regard as well, regarding the kilaim of the vineyard? The Brisa conclude Ruadin La'ol B'Shtayim, and the same segment can be made in regard to Ola on two accounts. We see that the Brisa uses the word Mishras infused to teach the flavor equals substance principle, and not as Rabbi Yochanan asserted the combination principle. So this whole discussion really tells us that the word Mishras is already occupied. Rabbi Yochanan learns from it one thing. Comes the Gemara and said this was already taken.
Can't use it again.
Can't use for the same.
Can't take from the same pot twice.
And this actually makes more sense because the word mishras means that it's like soaked, something that is soaked. What did the Rabbi Yochanan learn from the word mishras? He said that
Doesn't mean it got spread out completely in
no, because the root of this word lishrot is to immerse something, to soak it in something. That's what mishras means. But Rabbi Yochanan learned that the word mishras teaches us that in all cases permitted is not combining with prohibited. But in the case of Nazir, since the word mishras comes in, now permitted would mix with prohibited. He said, but you can't learn because it's already taken. What do we learn from it? That if you soak two grapes in, actually we learn from it something else. We learn that flavor equals substance. What was the case? That flavor equals substance is that he soaked grapes in water and drank the water. The anovim, the grapes are intact, but somehow there is wine flavor in the water, and he drank it, is liable.
Why only in the case of the Nazir it combines? Why? Why not every case?
Because the case of a Nazir, Rabbi Yochanan says that the word mishras to him is superfluous, is not needed. Torah could say Nazir should not drink wine. Why does the Torah uses the word mishras anovim? So Rabbi Yochanan learns from it that in the case of Nazir, permitted combines with prohibited. Now they can form a kazayas together if they have an olive volume of permitted. Prohibited, you ate it, you labo. He said, very nice, but it's already taken. Something it's being used to teach me that flavor equals substance.
Don't we have that where the piece of meat falls into the pot of milk, and so the flavor spreads out? Or if you add a larger volume of milk, it has to be until the flavor disappears, correct? So you can still taste the meat in it. It's still problematic.
It's intricate laws regarding in a situation like this because there's so many variables. Like, do you see the meat? You don't see the meat. What was in the bottom? Was it hot? Was it cold? Did they give flavor or didn't give flavor? Sometimes they would give a goy to taste, even if there is more. Still see if there is flavor of meat in the milk. Which one is more dominating? There's a lot to it. Not a clear cut of. You have the laws of batul b'shishim. It's nullified, but it's only when you don't see it and it's not giving.
Flavor.
Was it hot? Was it cold?
And flavor, yeah.
Right. And if he gives flavor, is it enhancing flavor or is detrimental flavor? What is it? If it's enhancing flavor, it would be a problem. So there are many variables.
Okay, thank you.
That's why it's better if somebody has a question like this to ask, to really ask a rabbi to figure out what's the right thing to do. You can't just throw it out, right? But in general, it says tator gova. That the tator gova means whatever's in the bottom dominates the top. the bottom is already has a standing. It's already in the pot for a while. The top is whatever is poured into it. So if the meat was in the bottom, and now you poured milk into the pot, tator is the one that dominates. So we got to check in the meat if there's flavor of milk.
There's a whole story about that. The Rabbi Wari told me that Malach, when they came to Avram Avinu,
Right.
they had the milk first, then they had the meat.
Right. So he wanted to say that by them, by them, they don't say tator govo, because this whole rule of the bottom dominates is by humans, not by
Ranges.
yeah.
I asked the same question.
Yeah.
Maybe it
So-
applies to the Tanya now. We're going through this Tanya about the Bainaning, the word in the between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov.
Yeah, those are side by side though.
Right. That probably has some kind of connection to this.
Well, he's usually dominating because he said I'm here first.
Yeah.
Right. That's
The old
That's
man.
Right.
Not the
He's been there for a while.
right
and
from the beginning.
The Gadol soul completely enters at 13. So
Right.
the Gadol soul is the visitor, animalistic soul is been there for all along. So he
Right.
says, "What are you doing?"
Right.
There's a new sheriff in town.
Yeah. Hopefully. So the Gemara says, Hamani, whose view is reflected in this Baita, which states that the expression mishras, infused, comes to equate flavor with substance. Rabboni, the view of the rabbis. Rabbi Yochanan Damar ke Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Yochanan, however, said his statement that mishras teaches the combination principle, in accordance with the view of Rabbi Akiva, who disagrees with the rabbis in this matter and who takes Mishras to teach the combination principle, just like Rabbi Yochanan. So either combination principle or flavor equals substance. Hey, Rabbi Akiva, which recorded teaching of Rabbi Akiva shows the combination principle? Perhaps you will say it is the statement of Rabbi Akiva recorded in the Mishnah in Nozid, that none. This reminds me, one time I came to Israel, but maybe 3-4 years ago, and a guy asked me, one of the guys that are in shul, this is a big Talmid Chacham, but a simple person, so he says, if I know Rabbi Lipsker, he asked me where you living. I told him I live in Florida. He said, do you know Rabbi Lipsker? So I said, I don't know him personally, but he's a big shliach in
The shul.
the shul. So he says, I remember he one time asked me a question in Tosfos in Nozir. So he was in 1960, and he remembers. And that's what he remembers, that he asked him a question. Tosfos in Nozir. And 45 or 50 years went by.
And he's still thinking
Oh,
about
so he saw you with very long hair. It was like they sent the,
No, he said,
the
you're
wagons.
coming from the same place? Oh.
Yeah, but I'm saying, what triggered it? Just like when the wagons showed up to get Yaakov Avinu. Oh, remember that we were learning.
So you were
like,
sitting in
so he sees
770,
this
and
long
he came
hair.
and asked me a question and knows it. So, Rabbi Akiva. So it says, if you say it's Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva, Eimer, Nozer Shota Pita B'yayin, but Nozer soaked his bread in wine, V'yesh bo tzorf kedei kazayis, and there is enough to combine to measure of an olive's volume, Chayav, he is liable for eating it. Apparently, we see Rabbi Akiva is applying the combination principle to the substances forbidden to a nozer. From where do you conclude that Rabbi Akiva is referring to where the kazais is composed of a combination of bread and wine? Dilma miyayin lechudei, Perhaps he refers to where the Nazir has consumed the kazayis of wine alone. And if you counter, if the Nazir consumed the kazayis of wine alone, what reason is there for him to say this? It would be an obvious thing.
Right.
What would Rabbi Akiva point in saying such an obvious ruling? I will respond. He would be informing us the following: is that even though the kazayis wine is in a mixture, because he dipped bread in wine, it does not stand alone, but is rather absorbed into the bread. Nevertheless, the Nazir is liable for consuming it. The Gemara therefore searches for another source. Ela Rabbi Akiva de Vraita, Rabbi Akiva in the Vraita, the Tanya, Rabbi Akiva imer Nazir shor pite b'yain, Nazir who soaked his bread in wine, v'ochal kazayis mipasu miyain, and ate an olive's volume of the bread and wine, chayu is liable. So we see that was the rabbis expound the expression mishras, infuse, to teach the flavor equates substance principle. Rabbi Akiva learns the combination principle with regard to Nazirus. Rabbi Akiva tam ki ikar menale, from where is it known to him that flavor is equivalent to substance? If he doesn't learn it from Mishras like everybody else,
Here we get to
he learns the combination factor, the combination principle. Where does he learn about flavor and substance? Yolif mi basar b'cholo. So he learns it from meat cooked in milk. Lav taima ba'amud also. In that case, is it not a mere flavor of milk that has been absorbed by the meat? Yet it is forbidden. Here too, in regard to all other prohibited foods, there is no difference. And we say that flavor is equivalent to substance. The Rabbanon and the rabbis who learned that flavor is equivalent to substance from Mishras, from the word infuse regarding Nazir, why do they not learn this principle from the law of meat and milk? Like Rabbi Akiva. So the rabbis would argue we cannot derive that flavor is equivalent to substance from the law of meat in milk, because that law is a novelty. Well, why is it a chidush? Says the prohibition against 21. The prohibition against meat in milk has certain features that are unique and surprising. It is thus an anomaly, and a stringency found in its regard, such as flavor equals substance principle, cannot be extended to other contexts. So saying this is a unique case, for just as other contexts do not contain the novel features of the meat and milk prohibition, so too might they not contain the flavor equals substance feature either. It is, they have special features when it comes to basar v'cholo. My chidush, and what aspect of this law is a novelty? If you say that the novelty is that this component by itself, the meat by itself, is permitted, and the milk by itself is permitted, and this component by itself is permitted, also, but when they come together, they're not allowed to. So he said it's not a chidush for basar v'cholo, but kilayim namik. The whole idea of the phenomenon of kilayim is the same thing. They're okay by themselves. Put them together, they're not okay. This component by itself is permitted, and this component by itself is permitted. Also, and yet when they come together, it is forbidden. Also, rather, the novelty of meat in milk is that if they soak the meat in milk even for an entire day.
I mean cold milk.
Yeah. I saw once a video, a guy takes a steak, takes a whole chunk of butter, he melts the butter, and then he hangs the steak on a thing, and he pulls the butter.
He bastes the steak with the
and
butter.
now it has a thick coat of butter that dries up, and he puts it like this for 30 days in a cool place, in a special thing, and after 30 days, He cuts it and then he cooks it.
And it's still, I'm saying this is kosher, it's not.
Of course it's not kosher, but over here they're telling us
I mean, no, there's no thing like cold,
it's not even good for dog food because you can't benefit from basar and
I'm not
challah.
trying to, I don't know.
So how it's permitted?
It's okay, I'm not... what?
How they say it's permitted?
Right, so let's see how is it happening over here. So
Robert,
it says,
can
if
I-
you soak it the whole day, right? What did we see, just read? That's what reminded me. We said, rather the novelty of meat in milk is that if they soak the meat in milk even for an entire day, it is permitted. Why is it permitted? Bashule bashule also. But if one cooks it in the milk, it is forbidden. So the issue kicks in with the bishul. Let's see in 25, it says meat and that has been steeped in milk for an entire day has certainly absorbed the flavor of milk, as if they had been cooked together. Nevertheless, the Torah allows one to soak them together and to consume the resultant mixture, while forbidding the identical act of mixing and the resultant mixture if effected through cooking. However, rabbinically, it is forbidden to eat any mixture of meat and milk. This enigmatic distinction renders this prohibition an anomaly, and it therefore cannot serve as a model for other areas of Torah law.
Rabbi, I have a question about the Nazir again. If they're saying that if he drinks of only the flavor of the grapes, he's liable. Why we have to study other cases? If you ate the kazayid, it's obvious. Anything else will be liable.
No, but maybe he has to drink also a kazait of that to be liable. Meaning that the grapes soaked in water, he would need to drink a kazais. And it has to be within achilas pas, meaning a limited time. These laws applies regardless of how much he ate and at what time. The question is about this drink. And is it considered wine or it's not? Just because it has flavor, is it considered wine? If it's interesting because you think, and let's say you're buying carrot juice, you're buying cranberry juice. Can the factory dilute it so much that you just you have the flavor of cranberry or whatever juice, and call it cranberry juice?
Oh, there's a whole thing about that from the FDA.
Right. So what is it? So the idea? So seemingly they don't say you can't tell the consumer substance equal that flavor equals substance. The meaning
You can.
meaning,
Because you look at the ingredients. The first ingredient is water.
It also says concentrate. I mean, clear.
Right.
The labeling has to.
right. It has to be
From
clear.
concentrate, right, Chaim? From
No. So when you
concentrate.
say from concentrate, what does it mean? There is substance. There's just the substance went through a process, right? But I'm saying something else. I'm saying if you only infuse flavor somehow,
Right. You have these black, like I get the 0-calorie black cherry seltzer. It has very little taste. You taste it, but it's like nothing there.
right? But they can't call it these cranberries inside. They can say flavor.
Flavor, yeah.
Right.
Flavored water. That's what all it is.
So for those who halacha is you're not allowed to drink a yain nesach, right?
Right.
So we don't drink wine that is, or anything that is mixed, even grape juice or anything that is made with grapes. So that seltzer, if it had the grape flavor, are you allowed to drink it or not?
Probably the grape flavor is a chemical, not from
It's
grapes.
not, yeah, right.
But the chemical might have a little bit of grapes, right?
It's not likely. Yeah. They make these flavors strictly chemically.
But using grapes,
Yeah.
no?
No.
Some concentrated.
It's purely chemicals.
Right.
So if you look at the labeling very carefully, it'll say grape flavor, or it has to
Yeah.
stipulate.
Like the word very carefully because it's not written in bold, right? It's not going to be big. It's going to be in the fine print.
You know, it's a similar thing with like dairy product. I mean, it has maybe even the whole of Israel. You have mamish cream cheese, and then you have cream cheese food,
Right.
which isn't cream cheese. That's has other stuff in it.
It's almost like the argument about smell, and if smell is something that you can I still smell? Am I allowed to still smell? Meaning, if
We're talking about the basic English.
if I stand, when you say you're not allowed to benefit from the smell of the ketores, take a sniff from the ketores.
The handyman. It was
So it means that it has some kind of substance, on one hand. But if you're sitting close to a restaurant that has making food that you like, or smelling barbecue, can they charge you
You're in
for
the
it?
public domain.
Can they
If you walk
charge
in and
you?
use their bathroom, you have to have on a mask and a breathing apparatus.
The joke says that there was a guy who would stand by a restaurant and he would never buy anything. He just said, I just like the smell. So the guy told him, you gotta pay me. So he took money, he puts it in a box, like in a pushka, and he shakes it. He said, here I'm paying you with the noise. I got the smell, you get the noise.
I get the benefit of the smell, you get the benefit of the noise.
The noise of money. So the Gemara says, "Ela te'itau le'kuli yom choshen." Now this is interesting because rabbinically it's forbidden to have flavor, meaning to benefit from a mixture of meat and milk, because you don't really have, the meat does not have milk; it has a flavor of the milk, and the milk does not have meat in it; it's just the flavor of the meat. Biblically it's okay, rabbinically it's prohibited. Rabbi Akiva nami basa b'chol v'adai chidushu, but by the same token, Rabbi Akiva too must agree that meat in milk is certainly a novelty. How then can he derive from the law of meat in milk that flavor is equivalent to substance in regard to all other forbidden foods? If there is a great chidush in meat in milk, you can't now take it and learn it in all other areas. Ela yolif migiul nochim. Rather, he learns that flavor is equivalent to substance from the law regarding the emissions of utensils used by Gentiles. That's why it's a problem to eat kosher food in a non-kosher restaurant, because of the emissions of utensils used by Gentiles. They cook. Sometimes I would hear these guys that say, I'm only eating fish in a non-kosher restaurant. Yeah, but what was it cooked? There's an emissions of utensils used by Gentiles. It says the emissions of utensils used by Gentiles, not mere flavor. Question mark, they're not just, it's just flavor. And yet it is forbidden.
So you got a problem to go buy a Burger King or a McDonald's with the smell coming from those places.
No, but you are inhaling that smell. You are
That's
consuming that smell. Not
Right.
just inhaling, you are consuming it with other food.
But when you're outside the place, it's, all right.
Hachanami loishno, here too with regard to, by the way, but one of the functionalities of the river upstairs is to clear up any kind of benefit from smell of non-kosher food.
But what do you gain from smelling?
The river upstairs?
Yeah, it's so-called Nahar Dinu. Nahar Dinu, after 120, the Shama goes through purification. No matter how tzaddik, how there's some kind of chizud alma, it's called the residue of the world. They have to clear up.
And it's hot, yeah?
That's what.
Could be cold.
No, it's hot, it's hot.
How do we
No,
know?
it's cold also.
Yeah, that's called the snow purgatory.
You know,
But anyhow, so the idea is that it says one of the things that we have to go through this river is to clear up from smell.
But what do you gain from smelling? If you're fasting on Yom Kippur and you pass by a restaurant and smell, you still have the same
Well, it's one of the senses that brings pleasure.
Doesn't make your
Look at why people are so upset about the so-called the COVID. Why they're so? They take away the smell. They say one of the symptoms. Of
I
no
wouldn't
smell.
like that. I mean,
You would or would
I
not?
would not like it. I
Of
like
course
to
not.
smell good things.
Of course.
Exactly. You have to say the bracha of
Yeah,
besamim.
Besamim.
Right, we see every Motzei Shabbos. It's a big deal, especially with David's son stuff.
Yeah.
thank you.
So,
So
Ella,
makes a Besamim mixture?
the Gemara Achanami lo yishno. So here too, with regard to all other forbidden foods, there is no difference, and flavor is forbidden just like substance. The Gemara explains why the derivation is not unanimously adopted. The Rabbanon and the rabbis who derive that flavor is equivalent to substance from the word infused, mishras. Why do they not accept this derivation from the law forbidding the emissions of utensils used by goyim? Rabbis reject this derivation because the law regarding the emissions of utensils used by Gentiles is also a novelty. And this is something we mentioned just before about any forbidden substance that imparts a spoiled flavor is permitted. Remember we said it makes a difference whether it's enhancing flavor or spoiling flavor.
Nobody wants a sticky smell.
The Gamrina in Nevela v'achos, we derive from the passage concerning Nevela that such spoiled flavors are permitted. Yet here, in the case of the emissions of utensils used by goyim, it is spoiled flavor. It is the spoiled flavor that is forbidden. So that's why it's a chidush, because usually only enhancing flavor is causing prohibition or causing it to be forbidden. But over here, it's spoiled flavor that makes it also. The law of Gentiles utensils is a novelty, and it therefore cannot serve as a model for other areas of Torah laws. Rabbi Akiva k'Rav Chia b'rei d'Rav Huna, the Omar lo yosotor b'kdei Rabasiyamo, who says in the passage concerning the Midianite utensils, the Torah forbade only a pot or other cooking utensils used that day. This is another concept in kashrus, that if it went through 24 hours, it didn't have 24 hours. Therefore, it is not something that imparts spoiled flavor into the food now cooked in it. This defense of Rabbi Akiva's position shifts the question back to the rabbis. For they say that even in the case of a pot used that day, it is impossible that the newly absorbed flavor did not spoil somewhat. The Gemara questions why Rabbi Yochanan limits the application of the combination principle to the case of Nazir. When the position of the rabbis, let us infer regarding the position of Rabbi Akiva. Do the rabbis not say that the word infused, mishras, comes to make flavor equivalent to substance? From here you can extrapolate to all other prohibitions in the Torah. Rabbi Akiva nami, according to the view of Rabbi Akiva as well, mishras leheter mitztaref leisur. Rabbi Yochanan should say that the word mishras comes to teach that the permitted food combines with the forbidden food to compose the critical measure, which is the Aleph volume. From here, you can extrapolate to all other prohibitions in the entire Torah. Amar Lei, he said to Rav Acha, Rabbi Yochanan is correct in not extending Rabbi Akiva's combination principle stated with regard to other contexts. Mishum da'av nozir v'chatos neksuvin aboim ke'achad ve'ein melamdin. Because according to Rabbi Akiva's view, the instances of Nazir and Chatos are two spiritual passages that come as one. and every time two scriptural passages come as one, they come to teach the same law, namely the combination principle, ve'ein melamdin, and therefore cannot teach that law with regard to other contexts. They're limited to that context. Buchim tiyuv.
Right.
Well,